Mr. Rees-Mogg, thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
You're an optimist on matters Brexit. What's your solution?
OK, first of all, can I agree with the last point that Mr. Benn was saying, that he is a really good and patient chairman, and there are areas of agreement, and we do our best to agree. But the highlight of the report is inevitably the issues where we don't agree, which divided straight down the lines of how you voted in the referendum.
And predictably so, yeah.
And predictably so. And select committee reports are powerful when they're unanimous. When they're not unanimous, it's just straight party politics or Brexit politics.
Let's talk about Ireland.
But let's come to your
solution?
question. The solution was set out yesterday very clearly by the head of HMRC, by John Thompson, who appeared, actually day before yesterday, in front of the Brexit Select Committee. And he said that he could implement the government's policy of not having any border, that it was all completely manageable, and if a border was to be imposed, that was a matter for the Irish government and for the European Union. There is no need for any border in terms of UK government policy, and essentially it's up to the Republic of Ireland and the European Union to decide if they want to impose one.
Do you have confidence that some of the proposed technical solutions for custom checks and so on, which lots of people say there's no need for, there can be a frictionless border, lots of people say, well, there's technological solutions. Are you confident that they're actually going to work? Because there are feelings in Dublin that they could actually be a gift to insurgents.
Well, I think most of it's very straightforward. You can do the customs declarations in the same way that you do VAT declarations, that a transition becomes a tax point rather than a checkpoint. And people pay their VAT by sending in a quarterly return. There is an exemption of £85,000 for VAT when you don't have to do this. The government has suggested the exemption for customs should be £250,000, and then it's a question of whether people pay their taxes or not. So that solution is very straightforward. Non-tariff barriers, well, some things already take place on an all-Ireland basis already. So animal hygiene is on an all-Ireland basis already. There's no need to break that up. So yes, I think the technological solutions are there. And from a UK point of view, we do not want to put tariffs on anybody. That free trade is the real opportunity of Brexit, so we shouldn't be looking to collect vast customs revenues.
Was it, the DUP are the kingmakers of this Parliament, was it counterproductive of the DUP to say and to threaten that they would remove their confidence and supply agreement if this wasn't solved?
Well, I think the issue the DUP has correctly raised is that we cannot have a situation where Northern Ireland is taken away from the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is much a part of the United Kingdom as Somerset is, and that is the position of Conservatives and Unionists.
But was it damaging to this government and its wider agenda that the confidence supply agreement that we've got could potentially be undermined by the DUP saying that this issue is not one that's being resolved to our satisfaction?
This is a Conservative and Unionist party that is the main party of government. The Unionist bit is essential. There is no majority within the Conservative Party, let alone in the DUP, to break up the United Kingdom to meet the requirements of the Prime Minister of Ireland. So I think what the DUP has said is pretty standard Conservative policy.
OK, Tim, based on what we've seen so far of how Brexit negotiations are progressing, are the negotiators that Britain has got good enough, up to the job of finding a solution on this vexed issue?
I think the negotiations are very hard because I think what they've revealed more than anything else is how fragile and insecure an organisation the European Union is. A confident institution wouldn't be so niggardly and difficult in these negotiations, but it is so worried about losing other members, it is having to be so difficult with the UK. And the Irish border issue, it's much easier to solve this issue if the trade talks were happening concurrently with the other issues. But because the European Union is so obsessed with this money issue, because the budget position of the EU is so weak, we are being put into these very difficult positions where, frankly, the Irish government is playing politics. Sinn Féin is trying to run a very hard line on this issue, and the Prime Minister of Ireland is feeling that he has to play that game too. And that, for me, is the principal lesson I think we have to take from this. I think this can be solved, but there's every possibility that towards the end of this negotiations, one country, remember how Wallonia almost held the EU-Canada agreement to ransom. There's a possibility that one country in the EU could do that again. We have to prepare for no deal. Even if we don't want it, because there is that
has to be an option in
possibility at the
negotiations.
last minute that we will have to accept that outcome.
You're flanked by optimists on all sides. Sounds like it's going to be straightforward. Do you share the optimism of Tim and Jacob?
I don't share the optimism about the idea of a deal if you want to stay outside the customs union. I do think there is a very simple solution, which is stay in the customs union. That is something I just do not believe that Leave voters in the country believe in. They voted on the basis that they wanted to unlock this wonderful potential of trade deals, which is the obsession of the right of the Conservative Party. I think they voted on economics and immigration.
Economic growth though is outside of the European Union.
Equally
Helen.
well, it is
If
the biggest trading bloc that is right next to us, whereas Australia is quite far away.
Well,
but this is the point, is that I just don't... I think this is one of these situations. I think people in Britain would probably think, why are we having this enormous row about something that is an obsession for the Tory party and no one else really cares about?
Jacob, this is, I mean, a charge that you've had to... it's been levelled at you repeatedly over the last few years. Is the obsession of a particular wing of the Tory party, particularly on an issue such as the customs union, impeding the finding of a really quite easy and pragmatic solution?
The customs union is a protectionist racket that protects continental European businesses at the cost of British consumers. It puts up the price of food, of clothing, of footwear. These hit the poorest in our country the most because the largest portion of their spending goes on food, clothing and footwear compared to the richer in society.
And the poorest people of the world.
And
in
the poorest
Africa.
people in the world. That's absolutely right,
places.
because it discriminates against imports from some of the poorest countries in the world. So it impoverishes poor countries at the expense of our poorest consumers. To get out of the customs union is the great advantage of Brexit. It will be very good for people in this country, but it will also help some very poor countries elsewhere in the world. The customs union is a real disgrace and a blot on the reputation of the European Union, if it's got a reputation.
Well, I think that the idea that the World Trade Organization is a sort of munificent kind of, charitable organisation, whereas the EU is grasping and nationalist, is a very strange way of putting this. I mean, I do think that it is something that I just do not think is in the mind of most Leave voters. This is what I think is fascinating. If you think, and I know you hear a lot about, we need to respect the results of the referendum, we also need to be really interested in what drove the referendum. And I think that was economics and immigration. I do not think it was free trade.
Okay.
Cheaper food's a pretty attractive thing for most people in this country. Cheaper clothing and cheaper footwear, likewise.
But if we fall out of the WTO terms, we will not have that.
Yes, we will, because we set our own
you're
tariffs.
here,
Just a moment, because it's really important. In the WTO, you register your tariffs with the WTO. We could put 0 on food, 0 on clothing, 0 on footwear, and that would be a decision of the British government.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.